Hello and welcome to this episode of Wise Human. Today I have with me Phil McAuliffe, the loneliness guy. He is on a mission to destigmatize loneliness and promote connection, I think for everybody, but specifically for gay men. Hello and
That's
welcome,
right.
Phil.
Nicole, thank you so much for having me, listener. It's lovely to spend some time with you as well. Thank you. I'm
Yes.
excited for this chat.
Thank you for taking the time. I'm really excited to dive in. Just speaking with you for a few minutes before, like we already are flowing, and I know that it's going to be a great episode.
I've got nothing left. Like the good stuff happened before you
Oh,
pressed
it's all
record.
gone? Oh,
Yeah,
shoot.
it's
I guess we should
gone.
just end now. Shortest episode ever.
There's nothing else.
So let's dive right in. How did you get to well, no, we don't want to go to how did you get to be the loneliness guy. Let's go back.
Hmm.
What
Yeah.
led up to becoming the loneliness guy?
Oh, life, really. Full like in And I feel, Nicole, my story is as unique to me as like it's unique to me. But there are so many commonalities with how we get to loneliness. And for me, I was actually just giving a keynote speech the other day, and the topic was loneliness, my search for belonging. And that essentially is the headline of how I came to feel lonely. For the longest time, for the longest time, I always felt just a bit on the outer of friendship groups, like at school, at primary school, at secondary school. And I think you call them elementary and like middle school and high school. We've just got two levels before you go to university, so primary and secondary. And I was like, I grew up in a tiny, tiny, tiny country town in regional New South Wales. It's got about 800 people in it. And it's, I guess, if, America is your frame of reference, think Oklahoma or Kansas. If Canada is your frame of reference, think Saskatchewan, just not as cold. And it was just a farming community. Lots of sheep, lots of wheat, kangaroos, and lots of very big, beautiful sky. And the people in my primary school, I went to a Catholic primary school, and there were 90 kids there, and most of them were farming kids. And so they loved to be outside. Whereas I was a town kid, my dad was the local accountant. And I loved reading. I loved learning. So class time to me was my happy time. Recess and lunchtime, everyone else was like going crazy, running around outside. I'm like, okay, is it time for the bell to go yet? And let's get back into the learning. And sport was a really big thing in like where I grew up and where I went away to boarding school just north of Melbourne. And people were obsessed with our local football here, Australian rules football. And I mean, I was interested and stuff, but like they just obsession level like dialed through the roof. And I just I didn't care. And I just sort of really felt like I had to struggle to sort of connect with the people around me. Like, and the people around me when you're sort of at primary school and secondary school, that's your world. That's your world. And so I really didn't feel that I belonged. And I'm sure there were some times where I felt that I did belong, but others, like it feels to me right now that I didn't really belong at all. And I had to like edit, adapt myself, mold myself so I would feel included. And then that happened pretty much all the way through secondary school. But when I was about 14, I realized that I kind of sort of maybe felt a bit funny around like men who I found handsome. And this was, so I was 14, it was 1991, Catholic boarding school, regional Victoria in Australia. It was not a safe space, not a safe space at all to like come out or do anything like, that what seems in lots of places, kids that age can actually do, as opposed to, back then in the early 90s. And so I actually really struggled. And part of that molding and adapting, that adaptation process was actually me like, trying to not be caught looking at the guy, trying to not be caught sort of, with the look or a mannerism or something that I would say that would give me away, kind of thing. So I became like very guarded and cautious, within myself and how I presented to the world. And then I did well at school, went to university, and I went to a really like prestigious university in Australia that it, like you have to get good results in at high school to get into. And I got into it, and like I felt that I found my tribe. I felt like, I was surrounded by people who had also been the smart kids at school, who really kind of, maybe weren't all that great at sport. They were interested in it from, a physical activity perspective, but, they were the smart kids too. And for the briefest moment there, meeting people and, connecting and essentially like, over like the trauma of high school, like, and I would get like, I would go into class and feel like an absolute fraud. Everyone around me felt like they were switched on. They could say they had the answers. They like the reading made sense to them. And so they could hold a conversation with the tutor or the lecturer. And I was just like, I don't know what's going on. And I just felt like a fraud. And I worked out though that, if I studied really hard, if I was like, the nice guy, buff, like almost like attain perfection, but make it look easy, that would help me get noticed, get the good praise, help me feel like I belonged. And it worked. It worked. But curiously, like you get praise when you sort of do that, and the praise is hollow because you don't feel that you're worthy of it. So you kind of, I was in this cycle of like perform and then like try to nail it and then get the perfection, like get the praise, and like, well, wasn't enough. So, and then I finished university, got into a graduate program in a department in the Australian Public Service in the Australian government, moved from Melbourne to Canberra. And it was on steroids, this like the hyper competitive nature. Like everyone was smiles and friendly and stuff, but people were just like, they were the ones who'd done well at university, and got into this place. And there were promotions and there were postings overseas, on offer, and it was just like wolves, sheep clothing, like smiles while holding, a massive knife behind their back, ready to, plunge it in at a moment's notice, kind of thing. And yeah, again, still hustle to fit into that kind of environment, to prove that I was worthy. And that worked. And I met my wife, met a woman, started going out, and we married a few years later. But she was with another agency that would send people overseas as well. And so we went on her posting to Venezuela. So I got to go to like live in Venezuela, which is, I think it is as far away from Canberra, where I am now, that you can go in the world without starting to come back. And yeah, we lived there for a couple of years. I was a journalist and things, but still always that hustle. always that, will a look give me away? Will something give me away? How do I have to edit and mold myself to fit in? And over the years, like we lived in Darwin in Northern Australia for a few years. I was posted to Ho Chi Minh City in Vietnam for 3 years, back here in Canberra for 3 years, Seoul for 3 years on one of my postings, and then we moved to New Zealand for her posting. And all through that time, I, was up until the time in Seoul, I was hustling to prove myself worthy. I like, the formula that I developed and I thought perfected stopped working. And I felt absolutely lost, so completely broken. And there I was at the embassy in my office, surrounded by smart people who could talk about like Australia's like policy on nuclear non-proliferation, like at a moment's notice. And this was just being dropped all around me, all these people being extremely smart, me feeling like a complete fraud. And yeah, I realized, it wasn't just me sort of, I'd read Lean In by Sheryl Sandberg, and I'm like, oh, maybe I need to like, the way to, not feel like a fraud is to, just lean in more. No amount of leaning in actually like helped. And I realized that something was not quite right within me. And I thought, oh, like I need a friend. I need to talk to someone. And I didn't feel like I could talk to my wife about it. It didn't feel like it was, my sexuality coming up. But I'm like, when you're living the diplomatic life like we were, like any kind of couples, like you're a very strong team. But I just felt like I needed some outside perspective. And I realized that I felt like I had no one that I could pick up the phone and talk to. Friends from university, I hadn't seen in person for like 7, 8 years. And I don't know how it is in the US, but you generally don't, as an Australian, well, back then it was hard to talk about your feelings. As an Australian guy, you definitely did not talk about what you were feeling. But yeah, like if I picked up the phone, like you'd have that hour-long conversation of like, how's work, how's like the spouse, how are the kids, like how are like our mutual friends, what's going on with them. Great chat, well, like we need to do this next time. I didn't feel that I could actually go, I don't know what's going on, something's happening, but I just need you to listen. But I don't know what I am supposed to say because I can't describe what I'm feeling in here. And yeah, and then there was something in the Boston Globe that I read, and it was about middle-aged men experiencing loneliness. And I read it, and I was like, oh, that's me. Shit. Like, I don't want to be lonely. Like, loneliness is so sad. It's like people are so clingy and so needy and just like, and I started looking stuff up on Google about loneliness, and like it was the stuff. This is 2016. Stuff on loneliness was only for old people. Stuff on loneliness was only for the people who were bereaved or had broken up. That wasn't me. I remember looking up loneliness in diplomats. There was nothing. And I called my employer's like counseling office. This is like my employer who has sent me and my family overseas. And there's a whole lot of stuff there. But I said, hi, I kind of sort of think that I might potentially be just a little bit lonely. I still didn't know how to talk about loneliness. And honestly, Nicole, I got horrible, shit, terrible advice. I now know why I got this advice. But the advice was pity. Like the response was pity. She's like, oh, you poor thing. this very broad Australian accent, like, you poor thing, that's not good. And then she's like, gave me the same advice that I could get off Google, which is like, you've got to put yourself out there. And I'm like, out there is Korea. How do I put myself out there? Like, you've given me 6 weeks of Korean language training. I can like order food, I can read, but I can't like have a conversation about about myself or anyone else. And she hung up and she's like, oh, well, essentially you work it out, and hung up. And yeah, I realized like things weren't going to end well for me if I continued on ignoring the nothing inside. And it just got harder and harder to sort of keep the mask on and to be good at the job and all of that kind of stuff. And I got help. I found a coach, and he sort of found me in sort of this moment of I guess the universe recognizing and giving me who I needed. And I did his program, and I was in his first cohort of this new program that he was developing. And he actually said these really powerful things, like after a share, and it was a group thing for men. And I'd said something, and he sort of said, down Zoom, like, Phil, do you truly believe that you are worthy of love and belonging right now, just as you are? And I really wanted to say yes. Yes, of course. No, but I didn't. Of course I didn't. And I just started to hear that word belonging around everywhere. Anyway, that's how I sort of got to that point of like loneliness, way forward. I realized that there was this very powerful quote that I read in a Brene Brown book where she was quoting Dr. Maya Angelou. And the quote was about belonging, and this absolutely pivoted me. You belong everywhere when you belong no place. I always stuff this quote up, but the price, Google it, but the price is high, the reward is great. Essentially what she's saying through my ham-fisted way is that you belong everywhere when you belong to yourself. And Nicole, I really never had belonged to myself. I'd never allowed myself to be who I was. So moments after reading that, I essentially came out to myself. The next day, came out to my then wife. And I was thinking she was going to be on a plane back home with our kids. I've got, twin boys. They're 16 now. And yeah, I was like, this is a big roll of the dice, but I've got to be me. I've got to be me. She stayed. And, we, things got real. Like our relationship got real. It was fantastic. But then during all of this time as well, I started noticing that people had similar thoughts and feelings to how I was, but they didn't have the words for it. I'm like, hang on, I've got some words for it now. I've got lots of words for it now, as we know. But I started to notice that, people's days, their careers were reliant on people having a good impression of them. And they would edit themselves, they would fold themselves into contort themselves into, impossible positions essentially for the pleasure of others. And I thought, right, so I wrote a book. When we moved to New Zealand, I didn't work, and my then wife was working. So I wrote a book, started a blog, started a website called The Lonely Diplomat, podcast, listeners in 190 countries around the world, because what I was saying and what I was writing, people were like, oh, shit, this is exactly how life is. No one actually says it because, diplomacy is meant to be perfect, all this kind of stuff. Anyway, I came out. My wife and I decided that we would separate, and I came out to the world and started meeting guys over coffee. And within a few moments, sometimes an inappropriately short amount of time, I was hearing some horrible things about what sort of like trauma and shame sort of inducing events in their lives. And they were lonely. They were lonely. And I'm like, oh, like I know some stuff about this. And so I created in January 2020, the loneliness guy. And yeah, sort of started putting what I did in on the Lonely Diplomat through the lens of a gay man, um, using my lived experience. So blog, podcast, website, all that kind of stuff. Um, it all came because I didn't feel that I belonged until I belonged to myself. And now that I know, I can answer absolutely categorically, like shout it from the rooftops. I know that I'm worthy of love and belonging right now, just as I am. I'm going to swear here, but gloriously fucked up. This like fucked piece of human tapestry, this glorious human. Like I'm worthy, no matter what I do, how I am. As long as I'm me, then that's pretty good. And so what I do now is like essentially like if I'm me putting myself into situations like this podcast, like if I'm accepted, fantastic, yay. But if I'm not, that's okay. I'm going to be okay. I'm still me. And phenomenally powerful for me.
How
So yeah,
important.
maybe I should have had like a 20-second condensed version of that. But yeah, I don't know.
No, we want the whole story. Definitely. So
There's more. I've edited that, but
you can check out his podcast for more.
yeah.
How important is it to truly authentically express yourself?
Very to yourself in the very first instance. If you're not being authentically you, if you're not being real to yourself, then you cannot possibly show up real and authentic and genuinely outside of yourself. So to those most important to you or to your communities. But it often is the hardest thing to do, is to be really you.
Yeah, because then you can be rejected and that's scary. But as you were also
And
saying, go ahead.
and that rejection, like yeah, the rejection of other people hurts, but it's the rejection of ourselves. That's the worst. That's
Mm-hmm.
what that's what makes us so scared to confront like the tough things in life and want to only have the good vibes only and project boundless happiness and positivity. So I get very suspicious when someone is boundlessly like, and I don't like the word toxic positivity because that's an unhelpful judgment. That's unnecessarily pejorative. But I think relentless positivity is actually a sure sign. Like there's some things in life that you can't like smile and power your way through just with a catchy slogan and a good bumper sticker. And loneliness is one of those. But unless you're being your real self to yourself and accept that, or even not accept that, that's where you start until you can accept that.
So, how did accepting yourself and eventually sharing yourself with the world, how did that shift your loneliness? What did that teach you about loneliness?
First of all, loneliness is a gift. Again, I'm going to swear, but I'm Australian and I think the world expects that. But loneliness is a gift wrapped in shit. Loneliness, we often feel lonely over the holidays. And loneliness is often the Christmas, under the Christmas tree, like tucked at the back. And it's probably been there for a few years. We just don't want to accept the gift. But it's been there all the way through like our years, not just, over the festive season. But we are so scared of going near it that we make it out to be something that's way worse. The fear of it is almost always worse than what it actually is. And so for me, that fear of loneliness kind of plays out in society where so much of our worth is tied to endless productivity, endless positivity, putting other people first and yourself last. And for me, that is a sure recipe that feeds our loneliness. And the faster we run from it, like it just sort of trots next to you. Like you can't outrun it. And so I don't know if I'm answering your question here, Nicole, but one of the things that I find in my work is that people come to me when they're absolutely exhausted. They've been running and running and running and running and running and running from themselves for such a long time, potentially for their entire life. And so they come to me exhausted. And so the loneliness that is like they've not been able to shake for their life kind of looms over them like some kind of monster from the Muppet Show. And, they're like, oh my God, it's like, it's terrible and stuff because you have absolutely no energy and no reserves to like sit with it. And so you meet your loneliness when you're at your lowest rather than when you have capacity to go, okay, like I'm kind of feeling that twinge of loneliness, like, oh, like that was a symptom. What do I need right now? And kind of, a bit of a course correction rather than like getting into chronic loneliness that can linger for years, have devastating health outcomes. Yeah, that's the connection that we seek happens when we first be ourselves. Because if we put ourselves, not our real selves, into the world, an edited version, any connection that we get back is not the connection that we need.
Yeah, and it's almost conditional at that point. We have to keep the mask on.
Yeah. Yeah.
And human connection that's I think the basis of a fulfilled life. We need connection. What are your thoughts on that? And how important is connection with others and connection to self separately?
One of the things here, there's some real, like that first part of the question is what I'll answer first. One of the things that I've learned about loneliness in my work, and this is the work of the late John Cacioppo from the University of Chicago, I think he was. It was like, the grandfather, the godfather of loneliness. And he was saying that connection is as important to humans as eating and drinking. It is as necessary to sustain life as eating food and drinking liquids. It's not a nice to have. It's not I'll do it when I have time. It's and for me, I thought there is such brilliance when academics can communicate in a way that regular people can connect with. And it's like he had the gift. Brene Brown has that gift. And it just like you just sort of go, oh my God, oh my God. He was yeah, and this was, and he was the source of the studies that says that loneliness is equivalent, does your body the same amount of damage as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. Um, and so there are consequences to ignoring your fundamental social need as a human. There are consequences to ignoring your social health. And at this point, generally, when I'm saying this, someone says, yes, but I'm an introvert. I don't need people. Actually, you do. You just need people in a different way than what you what you feel the world expects of you. You feel that the world expects everybody to be an extrovert, but you still need people. You can enjoy your own company. Like, I love being by myself, but being alone is different to being lonely. And every human, every human, every human requires other humans. And when we don't meet that need, we go looking for it in whether we know it or not. And when we know that, with awareness comes choice. And when we're aware of that, we can then choose to find the connection that actually nourishes you. Because the connection that nourishes you, Nicole, that nourishes the listener, is different to what nourishes me. But it doesn't like make it any better or worse or anything like that. But it's just like, well, saying going and joining a club or doing this, that, or the other thing. But that's great advice, but it's very general. I prefaced like, that very long share about my story. It's like, how I got to loneliness was as unique as me. So the connection that I need is as unique as me too.
What happens when you're lonely and you go searching for connection, maybe subconsciously, and you don't know what you're
Mm.
looking for?
Humans need to feel that they belong. And when we don't feel that we belong, the thoughts and feelings of loneliness generally aren't far away. And we can hustle to feel that we belong, to prove that we are worthy of someone seeing us, someone hearing us. Because when we've seen and when we're heard, we feel that we belong. And we search for that belonging in all sorts of ways that can sustain us or be actually really bad for us. Bad for us individually as like the human entity, bad for families, bad for communities. Because when we feel that we are seen and we are heard, we feel that we belong. And so sometimes, I think it's fascinating. I've got, a politics background. And like looking at why people join far right organizations. Why do people join like gangs, outlaw motorcycle gangs, or organized crime, or the Rotary Club, like anything like that? People join that because they feel a sense of being seen and being heard there. And we can stay in these places because we feel that we belong, when fundamentally they can be doing us as individuals, as us as a community, doing us damage. And essentially, like it's high school never ends. And like for all of us, like I don't know about you, Nicole, like you look a bit younger than me. I'm 46 years old. And in my mind, I'm still 14. I have a sense of humor of like a 14-year-old boy too. And it's a bit sad that our 16-year-olds have like evolved beyond my humor. I'm like, nope, I'm bringing you back. And my partner Jeff, he gets me as well. He's still 14 too. But yeah, like we do all sorts of, like we stay in terrible jobs. We do so many things that are harmful to us because we fear that we won't belong, we'll be outcast. And that taps into the fear of loneliness. It's better to stay in in an environment that doesn't serve us, whether that's a relationship, a friendship, workplace, community group that doesn't serve us, than being alone and lonely.
What do you recommend for somebody who's maybe in one of those situations? How do they shift their mindset?
It's hard to give advice that would be helpful without knowing someone's specific story, because the specific story is important. How they got to there was really important. However, in a very general way, I would say pay attention to you. You're giving yourself clues about, intuitively, you're giving yourself clues that something is not right. And one of the things, I'm like the Olympic champion of this, and I see it all the time in my work. We've trained ourselves, we tell ourselves, and the social messaging that we get as men here in Australia is that emotion's bad. And so we just try to logic everything. So problem has a logical solution. Loneliness doesn't care. You have to feel it first. And then after you've felt it, like the path, the way out to connection happens when you've sat with your loneliness for a little while. So it's not fun. It's not exciting. It's not like that 30-second sound grab that social media platforms love. But it takes getting really quiet and listening. We were just watching Jumanji the other night. But it's like, the sound of the drums at the, like, when like something's about to happen in Jumanji, like there are drums within you. And it's time to stop thinking, stop reasoning them away, and actually sit with them for a moment. That's my advice. Very general.
Which is fair. Like you said, everybody's situation is different. How do
Yeah.
you how have you personally, what are your drums? What are your signs?
I just got chills then. I'm like, I love the question, but I hate the question. Right. So I just want to preface it with this. I do not want to sound like I have all my life sorted. I don't. I'm in the business of living my life. Um, and even just yesterday, I was, I get so in my head, and my day just kind of comes into this like shopping list of things to do. And I'm like, oh shit, I've got to do this, I've got to do this, I've got to do this, I've got to do this. Oh my God. And I started feeling myself like becoming tighter and tighter and tighter and tighter and tighter. And so I noticed when I kind of, what leads me to feeling that kind of, that feeling, which then previously I would have like tried to perfect my way out of it, which is essentially suppressing what I'm telling myself. what I what I do like what I do to lead to that, I'm like the world's best comparer. Like I engage in comparison all the time. And some of the advice that I give to my audience, and I'll say it here, is that when it comes to loneliness, thoughts and feelings of loneliness, we turn into like, comparative champions. We engage somehow in comparative and competitive feelings, thoughts and feelings. And so when it comes to loneliness, we get into comparative and competitive loneliness. So I'm like, they must, and it's the 14-year-old in me. It's like they must be being successful because like they're like more popular than I am. Like they're smarter, they're better looking, they're like whatever it is. And so I like, compare myself, what I'm seeing and what I'm imagining, and then making myself feel bad. I'm drinking poison, expecting them to feel bad, which is like the great definition of resentment. And so that for me is one of those things where like that's one of my clues. It's like when I'm involved, like when I kind of just I'm on that hamster wheel and I'm the hamster and the wheel has just gone a bit too much, bit faster than what I can keep up with. And I'm like in that moment of like, oh shit, I'm about to be thrown out. Or I get into like, just this mood of comparative and resentment and things. And I'm like, okay, what do I need right now? Generally, the answer is I need to put down the phone. I need to put down Instagram. I need to go for a walk. I need to, I don't know, like listen to the Rosellas outside or, go and have a chat to the magpies who live in our backyard. And yeah, or just sort of like, go and look at the sky for a few moments. Like take a big deep breath here and, in Canberra on the traditional country of the Ngunnawal people. And like, it's beautiful country. Go and explore it. Like, go 5 minutes from our house and climb a hill and overlook the like the marvelous city and environment that I live in. But get out of me, go and get awed. Like if it's at night, go and look at the sky. And whatever's going on in my head right then, it's like generally, it's like and very quickly my intuition's like, be you. It's time to be you. And I'm like, okay, all right, it's time to be me.
Yeah, bringing yourself back to the present moment, it sounds like, is key.
Yeah. Oh, like that sounds so easy. It's so much easier to say for me than it is to do. And it's so much easier advice to dispense than it is for me to do
Of
sometimes.
course. I feel like it's almost
Yeah.
always easier to see somebody else's situation from the outside and give them advice versus yourself when you're in all the feels.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. And all the feels and all the thinks.
Mm, mhm.
And for me, yeah, it's those things. I could say thoughts, but I think,
I like
it's
thanks.
yeah, I was like, all the feelings and all the things. But yeah, it really for me, yeah, it's almost a daily practice, almost a daily practice to keep on coming back to myself.
Do you have a regular daily practice, like consistently you do the same thing every day to keep you in that?
Um, Nutritionally, yes. Like I love like working out and like moving my body and stuff like that. And I do intermittent fasting. So at midday, like the food starts and like generally for ease and convenience, it's the same kind of food each day until like 8 o'clock at night. But I can do it, obviously, like have a routine in my day for my physical well-being, but for my emotional well-being and my mental well-being, and my social well-being, that has been harder because I get consumed with busyness, and busyness kills connection. Sure as eggs, busyness kills connection. And I get wrapped up in busyness. And for me, I have been practicing the last few weeks, getting to a couple of months now. I had intentions of, at the end of the day, journaling, and then toddling off to bed. However, like I have calls generally that like coaching calls at like 7:30 at night, finish at 8:30, or 8:30 that finish at 9:30. And after a coaching call, I'm knackered. I'm done. Like no one's getting anything else out of me. Because sometimes they're quite intense. And so the idea of kind of Carrie Bradshaw style, sitting down or writing is like, dear diary, this is the day. Like, I'm done. Like, and so what I've been doing is waking up in the morning, and rather than reaching for the phone, because my business is global, my work is global, and it's always on time for someone else when I'm asleep. And so I sit over there, turn the coffee machine on, pour myself some coffee, get my journal out, and my journaling is the setting of intentions for the day. And my journal is here, actually. So it's a nice Moleskine journal with a nice pen. So it's an event. It's not like writing on scrap piece of paper. And for me, I set 5 intentions for the day. And generally, it's about bringing myself to me, and having that intention. One of the intentions that features regularly is to stretch. My podiatrist tells me that I need to stretch a lot more. And one of the intentions that gets there every day relates to kindness and honesty, because every conversation, every interaction is made better when we apply kindness and honesty. And for me right now, it's acceptance and surrender. So, hi, I'm Phil, reforming control freak. No, that's judgmental. I'm a reforming control enthusiast, control-seeking enthusiast, and a reforming people pleaser. And for me, there is a lot to be gained in sometimes the struggle to accept and surrender. And then I move on to 5 things for which I'm grateful. And this morning, it was, I'm grateful for the heater. It was -6 this morning. So Celsius, I don't know what that is in Fahrenheit, but it was cold. And unlike houses in other cold climates, houses here in Australia aren't built for anything. Our houses are hot in summer, they're cold in winter. So there's about 3 weeks of the year where they're pleasant. And so I was grateful for the heater. I was grateful for the coffee. I was grateful for the lovely meal that my partner Jeff made last night. And grateful for the government that we live here in the ACT, the Australian Capital Territory, who has a scheme of helping people put solar panels on their roof and transition to cleaner appliances that cost less. So I was grateful for that. And then I move on to my dreams. And 5 dreams. And then I write the statement, I am for my dreams today. So I'm not actively working against myself. And then I write down my values. So while I'm doing all of that, while I'm accepting and surrendering, I have a reminder in my very sleepy heart at that time of the morning, it is like generally about 5:30. Like I have a reminder that all of this will be done through the application of my values, me being me. And then the next morning, I review the day before, and I'm like, well, I didn't meet my intentions, so I intend to fail better today. And I'll keep trying that because it's still important to me. It's not necessarily like very lot. It's like a few lists and things, but it helps bring me into the moment before I like thrust myself into the day. And sometimes, hearing some really heavy things from people as well. It's like, no, I'm being me.
Yeah, taking that time and space to center yourself and really have that connection with yourself first before extending to others.
Yeah, yeah. All while caffeinating. So, it's a win-win.
What are a few tips for somebody to seek connection? Or what are tips to develop connection? How do you develop connection? There's the question.
Yeah,
How do you
yeah.
develop connection?
I think I've said this in the chat. It's really important. The connection that that I need, the connection, Nicole, that you need, happens when you're yourself. You're being you. And that can feel very edgy. It can feel very scary because when you're you, the judgment that you get, when I'm me, the judgment that I get, if it's bad judgment, it hurts. But if you get the judgment that's good, oh my God, like they see me, they've heard me, I feel like I belong. But not everyone has earned that right. It's a privilege. It's an absolute privilege to let others see and hear you. And not everyone has earned the right to hear that, to earn that right. So I think a tip would be for me to say somebody has earned the right to see you and hear you. I often get that response when I'm like, yep, someone's got to, like, you've got to be seen, you've got to be heard. It's like, well, there's no one around me. It's like, yes, there is. There are people in your life, but you're not showing up. You're not allowing them. You're not letting them in for very good reason. Generally, for very good reason. Like something's happened in your past that's made you sort of show up in a certain way. But that mode of being, that strategy, like it did for me, stops working. And so I actually challenge, Nicole, if it's you, I challenge you, but listener, I challenge you if you're sitting here going, but I've got absolutely no one in my life. It's like, I think you do. Because what you're wrestling with is that kind of moment of being vulnerable.
Yeah, and once you open that door in a safe space, it breeds connection. Like
Yeah.
you see how much somebody can actually be there for you, and they want
Yeah.
to be there for you when you finally open that door.
Yeah. Yeah. And in my work, so I work for like diplomats. They're just like a class of humans that are completely different. Like sometimes the laws of humanity don't work, don't apply, or they think they do. That's the problem. They don't apply. It's like, no, you're still subject to the human condition. But for gay men, and generally speaking, others in the rainbow community, but for gay men, generally in our formative years, being you was like, a free way to getting beaten up. And so we got through our days by masking up. We got through our days by pretending to be someone who we're not. And it worked. We got through more days because that worked. And then, we come out, and sometimes the community is not the safe, welcoming, tolerant space that the advertising claims. Like, there's a hierarchy. There's tribes. And sometimes the tribes dare not speak to each other. And I remember when I came out, I was even in New Zealand. And I'd been living in Wellington, married man to a woman, a couple of kids. Like, I didn't know anyone who wasn't married, didn't have kids. And so I was like, oh, how do I, where are the gays? like, and yeah, very quickly, I appreciated it. It's like people wanted to place you somewhere. It's like, no, 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 no. I have just done a shitload of work within myself to be placed squarely within me. I'm going to be me in this situation. Like, you can put me whatever you like, but I'm not putting myself in there. Like, I'm going to be me. And sometimes, because don't really fit with any crowd, I fit with me. Sometimes, you get excluded because people don't think of you. But I would much rather include myself to be me, however that is, than be included for someone that I'm not. Because that's conditional inclusion. So it takes vulnerability, it takes courage. And sometimes we just don't have the energy to do the brave, courageous thing. And that's okay. But the connection happens when you are brave and courageous. And there are connection hits and there are connection misses. And the connection misses are usually like, yeah, I'd love to, but I'm so busy. And I've had people, Nicole, who have told me that I've deserved my loneliness. That I should just shut up, stop whinging. What's the American equivalent of whinging? Like whining, stop moaning, stop complaining. Like, just shut up, man up, get on with it. It's like an attitude that has killed far more people than I think we'd all care to admit. And frankly, I'd rather a few moments of being brave and courageous than the alternative. I'm done.
I feel like we could talk for hours. Thank you
Mm-hmm.
so much for sharing today. I know we're getting to our time, so I want to be respectful of your time, but I do have a few final questions.
Yeah, please.
What do you wish more people knew about you?
um, that I was about to all of these things, and I'm like, no, 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 that I'm a huge nerd. No, people know that. That I'm a plain nerd. No, people know that too.
On your website.
Yeah, I know. It's like I have a wicked sense of humor. And when I do this work, it's serious. And stuff. And sometimes people's, come in a very raw state. I go to great lengths. This is one of my superpowers. Because I see people. I hear people. People feel that they belong with me. And sometimes that doesn't come across on like social media or whatever. But generally, like I have like this kind of wicked sense of humor. Um, and yeah, like it's you know, it takes time to get to that point though.
What is your current mantra?
Acceptance and surrender. Yeah,
Good one.
yeah. Because there's a whole lot of stuff that comes from that, but allowing me to be me, accepting myself and surrendering to that, allowing the universe to work through me um, for what is needed. Um, yeah, that's and like relinquishing having to control everything.
If you could tell everybody in the world one thing, what would that be?
Oh, you are enough. You are enough right now, just as you are. And because you're enough, the world needs you, not who you're pretending to be, not who you're hustling to be, not what you're hoping you'll become. The world needs you to be you.
Hmm. Yes, I could not agree more.
Yeah.
Mm.
And you're not broken. You're not broken. You're human going through. And if you're experiencing loneliness right now, like you're a beautiful human who's going through a tough human moment, but you're not broken. Absolutely not broken. Like it makes you even more of a human, and I'm here for humans.
Mm.
Like they're my jam.
Same.
Yeah.
That's
I
why we're
got
here
that
right now.
sense, right? Yeah.
So, how can people get in touch with you if they want to work with you? I know you do coaching, you have some courses online as well. If you want to talk just a
Yeah.
little bit about that.
Yeah. So me and my team, I've now realized over the past few months that while I'm great, I am human, and I'm embracing my humanness. And I've built a team of people who have skills and experience that I don't have, who believe in my vision as well and are all in. So I am developing some new content and new services that will support people where they are in the world, how they are in the world in a way that they want, or what's comfortable with them. Because I realize that a one-on-one call with me and committing to that can be an enormous step. So I have a blog, I have a podcast that is available wherever you are, however you are, um, and then people will be able to take little steps to get some support according to their needs. There's been a whole lot of research come out recently here in Australia that people experience loneliness, are more acutely aware of their loneliness at times of change in their life. So for gay men, it's coming out, um, moving house, changing job, ending a relationship, starting a relationship. That's sort of times when we can feel acutely aware of our loneliness. So yeah, it's meeting people where they are and developing some services for them. But the great entree is the blog and the podcast, and if people can get some great support that helps them learn about loneliness, but then the confidence and courage to then do connection from the podcast, then that's great. But sometimes we need some help to do the connection. Sometimes we need some help to learn what our loneliness is trying to tell us. And that's what I'm here for.
Do you want to share your website and handles? And they will be shared in the show notes, but just speak them out.
Yeah, so it's the lonely diplomat, the lonelinessguy.com. There is also the lonely diplomat, the lonelinessguy.com, and yeah, the loneliness guy at on Instagram, under Phil McAuliffe on LinkedIn. That's a bit more serious, and the loneliness guy on Facebook. I'm on TikTok, but not really. I kind of have some issues with TikTok, going to that whole trying to solve people's problems, complex problems in a couple of seconds. And where else? Pinterest as well. So yeah, there's a fair few things there that if you're on Instagram, like it is generally safe for work, but expect to see some shirtless or other kind
The
of
vest.
the kind of content, because it's sometimes very tough to get gay eyes to stop scrolling to take in some important content, because nobody goes onto social media to learn about loneliness. We go there generally because we're feeling lonely and we want a distraction. So yeah, sometimes gay eyes um, need encouragement to stop scrolling
A
to
little
take in
bait.
the. Yes, I know. I was like, oh, but I do it in a way that's like, authentic to me.
Yeah, of
Yeah.
course.
Yeah. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Phil, for taking the time to sit down with us and share your knowledge and wisdom.
Thank you so much, Nicole, and what you're doing here. I'm sure the listener is like nodding their head and just absolutely in agreement. What you're doing here is really special, and reminding all of us in the similar way that I do that we're human, and that amazing things happen when we own our humanness. So thank you for what you do.
Thank you so much for that reflection. If you enjoyed this episode or found value in it, I invite you to leave a 5-star review, or share with a friend. And be sure to subscribe so you don't miss future episodes.